September 8th, 1888, Whitechapel, London. The fog rolls thick tonight, thicker than usual. I can taste the soot and desperation in every breath. This cramped room above the bakery reeks of stale bread and something else, something that clings to my clothes, my skin, my very soul. The candle flickers as I write, casting shadows that dance like the memories I cannot escape. Why do I write? Perhaps because the silence has become unbearable, or perhaps because I need to understand what I have become. These pages will never see another soul's eyes. I shall make certain of that. But tonight, I feel compelled to confess to the only witness I trust, myself. This morning I woke to the sound of church bells and the stench of the Thames carried on the wind. How fitting that I should wake to such a symphony of death and decay. The bells ring for souls I've helped to send to their Maker, or perhaps to send to meet mine. The Thames carries away the sins of this cursed city, but it cannot wash clean what I have done. I walked these nameless streets again today, observing the nameless faces that populate this forgotten corner of the world. Do they see me as I see them? A fellow traveler in this maze of misery? Or do they sense something darker, something that sets me apart from their mundane sufferings? There was a child today, no more than 7, begging near Dorset Street. Her eyes, her eyes held such emptiness. Not the innocent emptiness of youth, but the learned emptiness of one who has seen too much too soon. When she looked at me, I saw myself at that age. Before I understood what I was capable of. Before I embraced what I was meant to become. I gave her a penny and watched her scurry away like a frightened mouse. But in that brief moment of contact, I wondered, am I saving her from a life of degradation? Or am I merely postponing her inevitable descent into the very streets where I now hunt? September 10th, 1888. The same wretched room. The memories assault me again tonight. Childhood. What a peculiar word for what I endured. Father's study, with its leather-bound books and leather strap. Mother's prayers, whispered desperately in the darkness, as if God could somehow undo what had already been done. Spare the rod, spoil the child, Father would say, his voice as measured as his punishment. But it wasn't discipline, was it? No, it was something darker. Something that taught me that pain and love were not opposites, but partners in an intricate dance. I remember the sound of leather meeting flesh, not just mine, but Mother's too, when she dared to intervene. The way she would cradle me afterward, her tears mixing with my blood, whispering apologies for sins that were never hers to bear. And the Bible, always the Bible. Passages about wrath and judgment, about cleansing the world of sin. Father would read them aloud as he administered his corrections. Strange how those same passages now echo in my mind as I walk these streets. Have I become the instrument of divine justice he always claimed to be? Or have I simply inherited his madness and given it a more honest name? There was a moment, I must have been 12, when I realized that Father enjoyed it. The punishment, the power, the fear in Mother's eyes. I saw him smile once, just slightly as the strap came down. In that instant, I understood something fundamental about human nature. We are all capable of monstrous things. The only difference is how honestly we admit it to ourselves. Did that make Father evil? Or did it simply make him human? And if he was human, what does that make me? September 12th, 1888. Still in this tomb of a room. I ventured out earlier than usual today. The sun was still fighting to penetrate the perpetual gloom of Whitechapel, casting everything in that sickly yellow light that makes even the living look half dead. The streets were already stirring with the desperate commerce of survival. I watched them from the shadows of Thrall Street, the women who sell the only thing they have left to sell. Their faces tell stories that would break a weaker man's heart. But I am not weak, am I? No, I am something else entirely. There was one, Mary, I think they called her. Dark hair, eyes like bruised flowers. She couldn't have been more than 20, but the streets had aged her beyond her years. She saw me watching and offered that practiced smile, the one that promises warmth in exchange for coin. For a moment, I almost approached. Not for what she offered, but to understand what drove her to this corner, this life, this slow suicide by degrees. What choices had led her here? What dreams had she buried beneath the necessity of survival? But then I saw it, that look in her eyes, the same emptiness I'd seen in that child's face, but deeper, more complete. She had already died, you see. Her body simply hadn't received the message yet. That's when I understood something profound, something that changed everything. I am not taking lives. I am simply acknowledging deaths that have already occurred. These women, these forgotten souls, they are already ghosts. I merely help them transition from one form of haunting to another. Is that mercy or madness? Perhaps there is no difference. September 15th, 1888. The room grows smaller each day. I killed expectation first, not a person. No, that would come later. I killed the expectation that life held meaning, that suffering served a purpose, that justice existed anywhere but in the fevered imaginations of the naive. It happened gradually, like watching a candle burn down to nothing. Each disappointment, each cruelty witnessed, each prayer that went unanswered, they accumulated like layers of soot on my soul until I could no longer see clearly through them. When did I first realize that God was either absent or malevolent? Was it watching mother weep after father's visits to her bedchamber? Was it seeing children starve in the streets, while the wealthy gorged themselves mere blocks away? Or was it something simpler, the moment I understood that power and compassion were mutually exclusive? I remember the exact moment expectation died. I was 14, standing in the rain outside St. Botolph's Church, watching a funeral procession. Some merchant's daughter, taken by consumption. The mourners wept and wailed about God's mysterious ways, about how she was too good for this world. But I had seen this girl before, seen her turn away beggars with disgust, seen her mock the afflicted, seen her treat her servants like property. She wasn't too good for this world. She was exactly what this world deserved. And in that moment, I realized that goodness was just another lie we tell ourselves to make the darkness bearable. If God existed, he was either powerless to stop suffering or chose not to. Either way, what use was worship? What use was morality? What use was anything but the honest acknowledgement of our true nature? That night, I stopped praying. Not in anger or rebellion, but in simple acceptance. There was no one listening. There had never been anyone listening. We were alone in the darkness, free to become whatever we chose to become. And I chose to become honest. September 18th, 1888. The first night I truly lived. Martha Tabram, that was her name, or at least the name she gave to the world. Does it matter? Names are just labels we attach to meat and bone and fleeting consciousness. But for the sake of this record, let us call her Martha. I had been walking the streets for hours, my mind churning with thoughts too dark for daylight. The fog had rolled in thick as a burial shroud, muffling sound and sight until the world felt like a stage set for some macabre performance. She approached me near George Yard buildings. Professional habit, I suppose. Her voice was hoarse from gin and rough living, but there was still something almost musical about it. She asked if I was looking for company, and I found myself saying yes. But I wasn't looking for what she offered. I was looking for something else entirely. Something I couldn't yet name but felt pulling at me like a tide. We climbed the stairs to that dim landing, and she began to disrobe with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had performed this ritual 1,000 times. But I stopped her. Told her I just wanted to talk. She laughed. God, how she laughed. It started as amusement but quickly turned bitter. Talk? She said. What's a gent like you want to talk to a whore like me about? So I told her. I told her about the emptiness inside me, about the rage that had been building for years, about the certainty that nothing mattered, and no one cared, I expected mockery, disgust, perhaps fear. Instead, she nodded. "I know that feeling," she said softly, "like you're already dead but too stupid to lie down." And in that moment I saw her, really saw her, not as a whore or a victim or a commodity, but as a fellow traveler in the darkness, someone who understood that life was just a prolonged exercise in disappointment. That's when the knife came out. I don't remember drawing it, don't remember the decision being made. It was simply there in my hand, as if it had always been there, waiting for this moment. Her eyes widened, but not with fear, with something like recognition, as if she had been expecting this all along, as if this was simply the natural conclusion to a life that had long since stopped meaning anything. "Finally," she whispered, just that one word, "finally." The blade went in clean and quick. No struggle, no scream, just a soft exhale, like a sigh of relief. And then something extraordinary happened. I laughed. Deep, genuine laughter that bubbled up from somewhere I didn't know existed. Not cruel laughter or mad laughter, but the laughter of someone who has finally understood the punchline to a joke the universe has been telling all along. We're all dying from the moment we are born. Every breath brings us closer to the end. I had simply accelerated the process, given it meaning, given it art. I held her as the life faded from her eyes, and for the first time in my adult life I felt truly alive. September 20th, 1888. My hands remember everything. I have spent the past 2 days studying my hands, these instruments that have become so much more than mere appendages. They remember the weight of the knife, the resistance of flesh, the warmth of blood. They have become my most trusted companions in this dance with death. There is a conversation that happens between blade and flesh, you see. A dialogue spoken in pressures and textures, in the way muscle parts and bone yields. Most people will never understand this language, but I have become fluent in it. The knife itself is unremarkable. A simple thing, purchased from a cutler's shop on Commercial Street for a few shillings. But in my hands, it becomes something transcendent, an extension of my will, my purpose, my very essence. I have been practicing. Not on people, not yet, but on sides of beef from the markets, on rabbits I catch in the shadows, learning the geography of anatomy, the secret paths that lead from life to death. Each cut teaches me something new, how pressure applied just so will part skin like silk, how a certain angle will slide between ribs as if they were meant to be parted, how warmth fades and stiffness sets in, marking the boundary between what was and what is. Am I becoming a monster, or am I simply embracing what I was always meant to be? Perhaps the real monsters are those who pretend that death is not the most honest thing in life. Death strips away all pretense, all lies, all the comfortable delusions we use to make existence bearable. In death we're all equal, rich or poor, saint or sinner, beautiful or hideous. The knife treats us all with the same impartial precision. It is, perhaps, the only true democracy left in this world. Tonight, I will walk the streets again. My hands itch for another conversation, another lesson in the language of endings. There are so many teachers waiting in the shadows of Whitechapel. So many who are ready to help me understand. September 25th, 1888. The night speaks to me now. Polly Nichols. She died believing she was alone, but she was wrong. I was with her every step of the way, from the moment our paths crossed on Buck's Row until her final breath misted in the cold air. I was her most devoted companion. The newspapers call it murder, but they lack imagination. Murder implies waste, senselessness, chaos. What I do is none of those things. It is art. It is purpose. It is the most honest conversation possible between two human beings. Polly fought at first, as they all do. Instinct, I suppose, the body's automatic rejection of its own conclusion. But there comes a moment, there always comes a moment, when understanding dawns. When they realize that this is not random violence but careful liberation. Her eyes changed when that moment arrived. The fear remained, but it was joined by something else. Gratitude? Relief? Or simply the recognition that someone finally saw her as she truly was? Not as a whore or a burden or a mistake, but as a fellow human being worthy of a meaningful death. The silence afterward is always profound. Not empty silence, but full silence. Pregnant with possibility and meaning. In that silence, I can hear the city breathing, feel the pulse of 10,000 heartbeats, sense the great wheel of existence, turning towards some unknowable purpose. People think death is an ending, but they are wrong. Death is a doorway. And I am simply the one who opens it for those too frightened or confused to find the handle themselves. When I left Polly that night, she was no longer suffering, no longer hungry or cold or desperate. She had transcended all of that, become something pure and perfect and eternal. How many people can say they have given such a gift? The police will come, of course. They will measure and photograph and theorize. They will turn my art into evidence, my poetry into procedure. But they cannot undo what has been done. They cannot make Polly suffer again. And tomorrow night there will be another teacher waiting. Another soul ready for transcendence. The conversation continues. September 30th, 1888. 2 in one night. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes. 2 women, 2 stories, 2 perfect endings. The newspaper men will make much of this, I suppose. They love their numbers and patterns, their attempts to impose order on what they perceive as chaos. But there was no chaos last night, only clarity, pure, crystalline clarity that comes from finally understanding one's purpose in the great machine of existence. Elizabeth first, in Dutfield's yard. She was different from the others, quieter, more thoughtful. When I approached, she didn't proposition me immediately. Instead, she asked if I was well. Such a simple question, but it caught me off guard. "Do I look unwell?" I asked her. She studied my face in the dim gaslight, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't expected. Compassion. Not the desperate kind that comes from wanting money, but the genuine kind that comes from recognizing a fellow sufferer. "You look like a man carrying a heavy burden," she said. And she was right, wasn't she? I am carrying the weight of revelation, the responsibility of truth, the terrible knowledge that most people live their entire lives without ever truly living at all. We talked for nearly an hour before the knife came out. She told me about her children, taken from her by the workhouse, about her dreams of escape, of a little cottage by the sea where she could grow flowers and forget the taste of desperation. When I showed her the blade, she didn't run. She simply nodded, as if she had been expecting this moment all along. "Will it hurt?" she asked. "Only for an instant," I promised. And I kept that promise. One quick cut across the throat, clean and precise. She was free before she hit the ground. But the night wasn't finished with me yet. As I walked through the winding streets toward home, I felt the pull again, stronger this time, more urgent, as if the city itself was calling to me. Catherine was in Mitre Square, counting coins by lamplight, such small coins, pennies and half-pennies that might buy her a meal or a bed for the night. The arithmetic of survival, calculated in copper and desperation. With Catherine, I allowed myself to be more expressive. Elizabeth had been a mercy killing, but Catherine became something more. A canvas upon which I could paint my true feelings about the nature of existence. The newspapers will focus on the mutilations, the removal of organs, the apparent savagery. They will miss the point entirely. This was not savagery. This was surgery. Spiritual surgery, cutting away all the unnecessary parts until only the essential truth remained. When I removed her kidney, still warm and pulsing with recently stilled life, I held it up to the gaslight and marveled at its perfect construction. How many cups of gin had this organ filtered? How many tears? How much poison, both literal and metaphorical? I kept it, of course, not as a trophy. Trophies are for hunters who have killed something external to themselves. This was different. This was a sacrament, a communion with the deeper mysteries of existence. 2 women, 2 perfect deaths, 2 steps closer to understanding what I truly am. The night had been generous with its lessons. October 1st, 1888. The morning after enlightenment. I woke this morning with blood under my fingernails and stars behind my eyes. The taste of copper and revelation lingered on my tongue like communion wine. How fitting that my awakening should come with such sacramental flavors. The city is different now. Not changed, but revealed. I see it clearly for the first time. This vast machine designed to grind hope into despair, to transform dreams into nightmares, to reduce human beings to their most basic components: fear, hunger, and desperation. But I am no longer part of that machine. I have stepped outside it, become something else entirely: an observer, a critic, an artist working in the medium of mortality itself. People pass by my window all day, scurrying about their meaningless business like ants in a hill. Do they sense that something fundamental has shifted? Do they feel the change in the very air they breathe? I think some of them do. The whores are more cautious now, traveling in groups when possible. The constables walk their beats with hands closer to their truncheons. Even the merchants seem to glance over their shoulders more frequently. Good. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. They are starting to understand that their comfortable assumptions about safety and order were always illusions. The world has always been a dangerous place. I have simply made that danger visible. But it's more than fear, isn't it? There's something else in the air. Excitement. The same electricity that fills a theater just before the curtain rises. They are afraid, yes, but they are also thrilled. They sense that they are witnessing something unprecedented, something that will echo through history long after their own forgotten deaths. I have given them a story. In a city full of grinding poverty and mindless routine, I have introduced mystery. I have made their mundane lives suddenly significant, because any one of them might be next. They matter now in a way they never mattered before. Is that not a gift? To transform the overlooked and forgotten into the most important people in London. To make washerwomen and dock workers feel like they are living in momentous times. The newspapers are already calling me a monster, but newspapers have never understood artistry. They see only the surface, the obvious, the literal. They cannot perceive the poetry in precision, the beauty in completion, the love that drives me to free these suffering souls. Let them call me what they will. History will be the judge of my work. October 5th, 1888. The birth of a legend. They have given me a name. Jack the Ripper. How perfectly dramatic, how beautifully theatrical. The newspaper men do have their uses after all. Jack. Such a common name, so perfectly ordinary. Every third man in London might be called Jack. A name that could belong to anyone. A baker, a clerk, a gentleman, a labourer. The anonymity is exquisite. And Ripper. Such delicious violence in those syllables. It suggests someone wild, uncontrolled, savage. They think I am a beast, tearing randomly at anything within reach. How little they understand about precision, about purpose, about the careful choreography of a meaningful death. But perhaps their misunderstanding is useful. Let them look for a madman, a monster, a creature of impulse and rage. They will never find such a person because such a person does not exist. What they seek is standing before them in their shops, walking past them on the street, perhaps even investigating their very crimes. I read the reports in the morning papers with the same fascination as everyone else. The theories, the speculation, the growing hysteria. It's like watching a play about my own life, performed by actors who have never met me. They think I am foreign, of course. That's always the first assumption when civilization fails to explain itself. It must be the other, the outsider, the alien presence among us. They cannot accept that monsters are homegrown, that evil speaks with familiar accents and shops at local markets. Some say I'm a doctor, and in a way they are correct. I am learning the anatomy of despair, the physiology of fear, the pathology of a society that creates more suffering than it can contain. My patients may not survive the treatment, but they are cured of their pain. Others suggest I am a foreigner, a Jew perhaps, or some other convenient scapegoat. Let them chase shadows and blame the innocent. While they hunt phantoms, I walk freely among them, studying my next subject, planning my next lesson in the art of absolute honesty. The name grows stronger each day. It develops its own momentum, its own mythology. Soon it will exist independently of me, taking on characteristics I never intended, becoming something larger than the man who inspired it. I am no longer just myself. I am Jack, and Jack is no longer just me. He is an idea, a fear, a story that will outlive us both. How strange it is to become a myth while still drawing breath. October 10th, 1888. The weight of attention. The streets crawl with police now, constables on every corner, detectives questioning anyone who moves wrong or looks suspicious. They have turned Whitechapel into a hunting ground, though they seem confused about who is prey and who is predator. I watch them from my window, these servants of order trying desperately to impose logic on what they perceive as chaos. They measure everything. The distance between bodies, the time between killings, the depth of wounds, as if mathematics could capture the essence of transformation. Inspector Aberline walked past this very building yesterday. Such an earnest man, so dedicated to his impossible task. He stopped to question Mrs. Henderson from the ground floor, asking if she had noticed any strange behavior, any new faces, any unusual sounds in the night. I could have leaned out my window and introduced myself. "Good morning, Inspector. The man you seek is here, directly above your head." The irony was almost too delicious to resist. But that would spoil the game, wouldn't it? And it is a game now, whether I intended it to be or not, a contest of wits between the forces of conventional understanding and the advocate of deeper truths. They have brought in bloodhounds, those ridiculous creatures with their wet noses and simple minds, as if the scent of revelation could be tracked like a fox through the countryside. They fail to understand that what I do leaves no trail because it is not separate from the natural order. It is the natural order finally expressed with honest clarity. The newspapers grow bolder with each passing day. They print sketches of shadowy figures, dramatic recreations of crimes they never witnessed, breathless accounts of the terror gripping the East End. They are writing fiction and calling it news, but perhaps that is more honest than they realize. All stories are fiction to some degree. The only difference is how much truth they contain. My story, our story, mine and theirs together, contains more truth than anything they have ever published. I have become the most famous man in London, and no one knows my face. I have touched more lives than the Queen herself, and no one knows my name. There is a profound loneliness in this kind of fame, but also a terrible freedom. To be known and unknown simultaneously, to be everywhere and nowhere, to be the most sought-after man in the empire while walking unrecognized through its streets. This must be what gods feel like when they walk among mortals. But gods, I suspect, do not feel the weight of isolation quite as keenly as I do tonight. October 15th, 1888. A moment of unexpected tenderness. Something strange happened tonight, something that shook me more than all the blood and screams and final breaths combined. I met a woman who made me remember what it felt like to be human. Her name was Sarah, or at least that's what she told me. She was different from the others. Cleaner, for one thing, better dressed. But more than that, there was light in her eyes. Not the desperate glitter of someone selling false hope, but genuine warmth. Genuine life. She approached me near Spitalfields Market, but not for the usual reasons. She was lost, genuinely lost, trying to find her way back to a boarding house in a better part of town. Some story about visiting a sick friend, and staying later than planned. I offered to escort her, and we walked together through the maze of streets I know so intimately. She talked as we walked, about her life, her hopes, her fears. Simple things. The kind of conversation I had forgotten was possible. She was a seamstress, she told me. She made dresses for ladies who could afford such luxuries. She had a little room with a window that caught the morning sun, and she kept flowers on the sill. Daisies, she said, because they were cheerful and didn't require much care. When we reached her destination, she turned to thank me. And then she did something unprecedented. She took my hand in both of hers and looked directly into my eyes. "You have kind eyes," she said. "Whatever troubles you carry, I hope you find peace with them." Kind eyes. When was the last time anyone had seen kindness in me? When was the last time I had felt it? For a moment, standing there in the gaslight with her soft hands warming mine, I almost remembered who I might have been. The knife was in my coat pocket. It would have been so easy. One quick movement, one final lesson in the nature of reality. She was perfect for it, innocent, trusting, full of the kind of hope that makes suffering inevitable. But I couldn't. Something stayed my hand, made me step back instead of step forward. She smiled at me one last time and disappeared into the boarding house, leaving me alone on the street with a confusion I had never experienced before. Why couldn't I complete the lesson? Why did her kindness paralyze rather than motivate me? Was it weakness or was it something else? Something that suggests I am not as far beyond humanity as I believed. I have spent the hours since then walking these streets, trying to understand what happened, trying to understand what she saw in me that I cannot see in myself. Her words echo in my mind like a song I cannot forget. "You have kind eyes." Perhaps that is what troubles me most. Not that she was wrong, but that she might have been right. Perhaps there is still something human buried beneath all this purpose and revelation. Perhaps the man I was is not entirely dead. But if that is true, if there is still kindness hiding somewhere inside me, then what does that make everything else? What does that make Polly and Elizabeth and Catherine, and all the lessons I have taught? No, I cannot allow such thoughts to take root. Doubt is the enemy of clarity, sentiment the enemy of truth. Sarah was an anomaly, a moment of weakness, nothing more. Tomorrow night I will prove that to myself. Tomorrow night the lessons will continue. October 20th, 1888. The voice of another. There is someone else living in my skull now, another voice that speaks when the night grows quiet and the blood has been washed from my hands. It sounds like me, but it says things I do not want to hear. "Stop this," it whispers when I sharpen the knife. "This is not who you are meant to be." But who am I meant to be? A broken man in a broken world, suffering quietly until death claims me naturally? A victim of circumstance, crushed by forces beyond my control? A silent witness to endless cruelty and meaningless pain? No, I reject that fate. I have chosen to become something larger, something with purpose. I have chosen to matter. The voice grows stronger after each lesson I teach. After Martha Tabram, it was barely a whisper. After Elizabeth Stride, it was a murmur. Last night, after Mary Kelly. Last night it was almost a shout. Mary Kelly. God, what I did to Mary Kelly. Even now, hours later, my hands shake when I think about it. Not from fear or regret, but from the sheer intensity of what passed between us in that small room on Miller's Court. She was so young, younger than the others, with skin like porcelain and hair that caught the candlelight like spun gold. When I knocked on her door, she answered with a smile that was almost genuine. Almost. We talked for nearly 2 hours before I showed her the knife. She told me about Ireland, about green hills and clean air and a life that seemed like someone else's dream. She told me about Joseph, the man she had loved and lost to the sea. She told me about the child she had given birth to at 15, the child taken from her by family who called her a disgrace. "I dream about her sometimes," Mary said, her voice soft as prayer. "My little girl, she'd be 5 now. I wonder if she's happy, if she knows I think about her every day, if she'll ever forgive me for the choices I've made." That's when the other voice started screaming. Not whispering or murmuring, but screaming at me to stop, to leave, to let this one live. But I couldn't stop. The lesson had to be completed. The art had to be finished. When I finally showed her the blade, Mary didn't run or scream or beg. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Tell my daughter I loved her." What I did after that, what I did to her beautiful young body, the newspapers will never print the details. They lack the vocabulary to describe such complete transformation, such thorough revelation of the truth that lies beneath all flesh. But the voice saw every cut, felt every separation of bone from joint, witnessed every moment of my perfect honesty, and it wept, not metaphorically, literally wept, filling my eyes with tears that had no business being there. Who is this other person living behind my thoughts, this weakness that masquerades as conscience? This coward who would have me abandon my purpose for the comfort of conventional morality? I know who it is, of course. It is the man I used to be. The man who believed in goodness and mercy and the possibility of redemption. The man who died slowly in father's study and mother's prayers and the endless disappointments of a world that promises justice but delivers only suffering. He should be grateful to me. I freed him from the burden of hope. I showed him the truth about the nature of existence. I gave him purpose and power, and the terrible freedom that comes from acknowledging that nothing matters except what we choose to make matter. But he is not grateful, he is terrified. And his terror is beginning to infect my clarity. October 25th, 1888. Questions without answers. What is murder really? The newspapers use the word so carelessly, as if they understand its meaning. But do they? Do any of us? Is murder the act of stopping a heart? Or is it the creation of conditions that make life unbearable? Is murder the quick cut of a blade? Or is it the slow starvation of hope that drives people to sell their bodies on street corners? By their definition, I am a murderer, but by mine, I am a liberator. The real murderers are the ones who built this system of grinding poverty and casual cruelty. The ones who profit from desperation while preaching virtue from comfortable pews. They have murdered more souls than I could kill in a dozen lifetimes. They just do it slowly, quietly, legally. They call it progress, they call it civilization, they call it the natural order of things. But what if murder is something else entirely? What if it is simply the moment when one consciousness decides that another consciousness should cease to exist? In that case, every thought of violence, every wish for another's harm, every moment of genuine hatred, is a kind of murder. How many murders happen in drawing rooms and churches and respectable homes every day? How many souls are killed with words instead of knives, with neglect instead of violence, with indifference instead of passion? At least my murders are honest. At least my victims know they are dying. At least they are granted the dignity of a conscious death, rather than the slow dissolution of hope that passes for normal life in this cursed city. And what of revolution? Is revolution not a form of sanctified murder? When the oppressed rise up against their oppressors, when the downtrodden demand justice through violence, society calls it noble, it calls it necessary. It calls it the will of God, or the march of history, or the price of freedom. Perhaps that is what I am, a revolutionary, not against a government or a class or a political system, but against the fundamental dishonesty of existence itself, against the lies we tell ourselves to make suffering bearable. But if I am a revolutionary, then what am I trying to revolution toward? What world am I trying to create? What truth am I trying to establish? I do not know, and that uncertainty terrifies me more than any blade ever could. Perhaps murder is art. Perhaps it is the ultimate expression of one human being's vision of truth. Perhaps each death is a brushstroke on a canvas too large for any single mind to comprehend. Or perhaps murder is simply murder. Perhaps I am simply a madman with a knife, creating meaning where none exists, finding purpose in purposelessness. The uncertainty is eating me alive, which is ironic, considering how certain I have been about ending the lives of others. November 1st, 1888. The question of beauty. What makes something beautiful? Is it harmony, proportion, the way light falls across a surface, or the way sounds combine to create music? Or is beauty something deeper, something that exists in the relationship between observer and observed? I have been thinking about this question ever since I saw my reflection in Mary Kelly's window, silhouetted against the gaslight, with blood on my hands and purpose in my eyes. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I looked beautiful. Not handsome or attractive, but beautiful, in the way that storms are beautiful, or fires, or the moment when day surrenders to night. There is beauty in completion, in the perfect cut that separates life from death with surgical precision, in the way surprise transforms into understanding in a dying person's eyes, in the absolute silence that follows the final breath. The poets write about the beauty of suffering, the nobility of pain, the transcendence that comes through enduring hardship, but they write from a safe distance, don't they? They observe suffering like tourists, taking notes for their comfortable reflections. I do not observe suffering, I participate in it. I am both its author and its witness, its creator and its student. When I end a life, I am not separate from the pain. I am swimming in it, drowning in it, being reborn through it. Is that not a more honest relationship with beauty? A more authentic engagement with the fundamental mysteries of existence? But then, I think of Sarah, sweet Sarah with her flowers and her faith in human kindness. She was beautiful too, but in a completely different way. Beautiful like sunlight on water, like laughter, like the promise that not everything in this world is broken. Which beauty is more true? The beauty of completion or the beauty of hope? The beauty of absolute honesty, or the beauty of merciful illusion? I used to think I knew the answer. I used to be certain that truth was always more beautiful than lies, that reality was always more valuable than fantasy. But now I wonder if beauty itself is just another lie we tell ourselves. Another way of making meaning out of meaninglessness. Another comfortable delusion designed to keep us from seeing the void that yawns beneath every moment of joy. Or perhaps beauty is the only truth that matters. Perhaps it is the one thing that makes existence bearable, the one light that can penetrate even the deepest darkness. If that is true, then what have I been doing? Have I been creating beauty or destroying it? Have I been revealing truth or obscuring it? Have I been serving some higher purpose, or merely indulging my own damaged desires? The questions multiply like cancer cells, eating away at the certainty that once made my actions possible. Doubt is a poison more deadly than any blade. November 5, 1888. The nature of silence. London is quieter now. Not the absence of sound, but a different quality of sound. Footsteps are more careful. Conversations are more hushed. Even the children seem to play their games with less abandon. I have created this silence. I have taught an entire city to hold its breath. Is that not a form of power more profound than any king or parliament could ever wield? But power over what? Over fear? Over death? Over the simple animal instinct to survive? Is that truly power? Or is it just another kind of slavery? The slavery of being needed for all the wrong reasons. The silence speaks to me in ways that words never could. It tells me stories about the people walking these streets. The shopkeeper who locks his door an hour earlier each evening. The mother who holds her daughter's hand just a little tighter when they pass through shadowed alleys. The constable who finds excuses to avoid his loneliest beats. They are all writing my story, with their fear. Every cautious glance, every hurried step, every prayer whispered in the darkness. They are all chapters in the legend of Jack the Ripper. I am being written into existence by the very people I terrify. But what happens to a legend when its creator grows tired of the story? What happens to fear when its source loses faith in its own power? What happens to Jack when the man behind the name begins to disappear? I feel myself fragmenting, splitting into pieces that no longer fit together properly. There is the Jack who writes to newspapers, taunting police with his cleverness, There is the Jack who stalks through fog-shrouded streets, selecting his next lesson in mortality. There is the Jack who stares at blood-stained hands and feels something that might be satisfaction, or might be horror. And then there is the man underneath all the Jacks, the man who once had a different name, different hopes, different possibilities. He grows fainter every day, like a photograph left too long in sunlight. Soon he will fade entirely, leaving only the legend behind. Is that what I wanted? To become pure story, pure fear, pure symbol? To sacrifice my humanity on the altar of meaning? The silence offers no answers. It simply listens, patient and non-judgmental, as I pour my confusion into its endless depths. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps being heard, even by silence, is more than most people ever achieve. November 10th, 1888. The arithmetic of pain. How does one measure suffering? In tears shed or screams stifled, in opportunities lost or dreams abandoned, in the distance between what is and what might have been. I have been attempting to calculate the total sum of pain in my small corner of London, and the numbers are staggering. Not just the obvious pain, the hunger, the cold, the disease, the violence, but the subtle pain too, the daily humiliations, the small deaths of dignity, the steady erosion of hope. Every person I pass on the street carries their own arithmetic of agony. The washerwoman with her raw, bleeding hands, the dock worker with his failing lungs, the seamstress going blind from working by candlelight, the child who has learned that love is conditional and safety is temporary. Against this vast ocean of suffering, what are my small contributions? 5 deaths? 6? A dozen at most? It is nothing, a drop in an ocean, a whisper in a hurricane. And yet each death has mattered. Each lesson has been complete in itself. Each transformation has been perfect in its own terrible way. Perhaps that is the point. Perhaps arithmetic is the wrong way to measure these things. Perhaps one perfect moment of absolute honesty is worth more than a lifetime of careful half-truths. Perhaps one clean death is worth more than decades of slow dying. But if that is true, then why do I feel so empty? Why does the completion of each lesson leave me hungrier rather than satisfied? Why does certainty breed more uncertainty instead of peace? I think about Mary Kelly's final words. Tell my daughter I loved her. Such simple words, but they contained more truth than all my philosophy, more meaning than all my purpose. In her last moment, she was not thinking about pain or justice, or the nature of existence. She was thinking about love. Love. The one calculation I have never learned to perform, the one arithmetic that remains forever beyond my understanding. Did mother love me when she held me after father's beatings? Was that love or pity or simple maternal instinct? Did Sarah love humanity when she saw kindness in my eyes? Was that love or naivety or desperate hope? Do I love the women I kill? Is that why I choose them so carefully, study them so intently, listen to their stories with such attention? Or is what I feel something else entirely? Possession, obsession, the desire to own their final moments completely. The questions pile up like corpses in a plague pit. Each answer births 10 new questions. Each certainty reveals a dozen new doubts. Perhaps that is the real arithmetic of pain. Not addition but multiplication. Not simple counting but exponential growth. Each moment of clarity breeds endless confusion. Each truth reveals infinite lies. I am drowning in my own understanding. November 15th, 1888. The question of souls. Do souls exist? And if they do, where do they go when the body dies? These questions have haunted me since childhood, but they have taken on new urgency since I began my work. I have watched the light fade from so many eyes. I have felt the exact moment when breath becomes just air, when flesh becomes just meat, when person becomes just memory. But I have never seen a soul depart. never witnessed the moment of spiritual transition that the priests promise and the poets celebrate. Does that mean souls do not exist, or does it simply mean that I am not equipped to perceive them? Perhaps the ability to see souls requires qualities I have sacrificed: innocence, faith, the willingness to believe in mysteries that cannot be solved with knives. If souls do exist, then I am a collector of souls. Not just a killer of bodies, but a harvester of something far more precious and infinitely more fragile. The thought terrifies and thrills me in equal measure. What would I do with such a collection? Line them up like books on a shelf? Study them for patterns and meaning? Or would they haunt me, following me through these streets like a procession of the damned? But if souls do not exist, if consciousness is just an accident of chemistry, if personality is just a pattern of electrical impulses, if love and fear and hope are just evolutionary mistakes, then what have I been doing? What have I been studying? What have I been trying to understand? The materialists would say I have been studying biology, the mechanics of death, the process of cellular breakdown, the simple fact that complex systems eventually stop functioning. Nothing more mystical than a clock running down or a candle burning out. But that cannot be all there is. There must be something more, something that explains why each death feels different, why each person's final moments carry their own unique signature of meaning. Martha Tabram died with relief. I felt it radiating from her like heat from a coal fire. Elizabeth Stride died with curiosity, as if death were just another country she was eager to explore. Catherine Eddowes died with anger, not at me, but at the life that had brought her to that moment. And Mary Kelly died with love, not for me, not for life, but for a 5-year-old girl she would never see again. In her final breath, I felt the presence of that love, like a physical force. How can chemistry and biology explain such phenomena? How can mere electrical impulses carry such weight of meaning? Perhaps the question is not whether souls exist, but what we mean by the word soul. Perhaps a soul is not some supernatural essence, but simply the irreducible core of what makes each person unique, the sum total of their experiences, choices, relationships and dreams. In that case, I have been both destroyer and preserver of souls. Destroyer because I end the continuing story of each person's becoming. Preserver because I hold their final moments forever, carrying the essence of who they were into whatever comes next. But what comes next for me? When my own story ends, who will preserve my soul? Who will carry the essence of Jack the Ripper into the future? Perhaps that is what this diary is. My attempt to preserve my own soul, to ensure that someone, someday, will understand not just what I did, but who I was when I did it. November 20th, 1888. The burden of certainty. I was so certain once. Certain about the nature of reality, certain about my purpose, certain about the meaning of my actions. Certainty was my armor against doubt, my shield against the chaos of existence. But certainty, I am learning, is a luxury that comes at a terrible price. To remain certain, one must stop asking questions. One must stop growing, stop learning, stop becoming. One must choose blindness over sight, comfort over truth. The moment I allowed doubt to enter my mind, the moment I began to question my own mythology, I started to see things I had been blind to before. The complexity of my victims' lives, the arbitrariness of my choices, the possibility that my great work might be nothing more than the elaborate delusions of a damaged mind. And once you begin to see, you cannot stop seeing. Once you admit the possibility that you might be wrong about one thing, you must admit the possibility that you might be wrong about everything. What if I am not an artist but a madman? What if I am not a liberator but a destroyer? What if I am not Jack the Ripper, legendary figure of history, but simply a broken man with a broken mind, who has caused immeasurable pain for no purpose at all? The thought should terrify me, but instead it brings a strange kind of relief. If I am mad, then I'm not responsible. If I am deluded, then my actions have no meaning. If I am just another damaged soul lost in the darkness, then perhaps I can find my way back to the light. But even that hope feels like a kind of betrayal. A betrayal of Martha and Elizabeth and Catherine and Mary and all the others who trusted me with their final moments. They deserved better than a madman's fantasy. They deserved meaning, purpose, transformation. Or perhaps they deserved something else entirely. Perhaps they deserved to live. The thought strikes me like a physical blow. They deserve to live. Such a simple statement, but it contains the power to destroy everything I have built, everything I have become. They deserve to see another sunrise, to love and be loved, to make mistakes and learn from them, to grow old and die naturally when their time came. They deserved chances I never gave them, choices I made for them, futures I stole from them. I told myself I was freeing them from suffering, but perhaps I was simply adding to it. I told myself I was granting them meaningful deaths, but perhaps I was simply stealing their meaningful lives. The certainty crumbles like old mortar, leaving me standing in the ruins of my own understanding. Without certainty, what am I? Without purpose, who am I? Without meaning, why do I continue to exist? I do not know the answers to these questions, and for the first time in my adult life, I am not sure I want to find them. November 25th, 1888. The weight of names. They all had names. Such an obvious truth, but one I have been avoiding like a man avoiding his own reflection. Martha Tabram, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Names given by parents who loved them, or at least hoped to love them. Names called out in anger, in passion, in grief. Names written in parish records and employment rolls and rent books. Names that meant daughter and sister and beloved to someone, somewhere. I have been thinking of them as subjects, as lessons, as necessary casualties in my war against dishonesty. But they were people. Complicated, flawed, hopeful, desperate people, with histories that preceded me, and dreams that should have extended far beyond our brief encounters. Martha Tabram was someone's child once. Did her mother sing her lullabies? Did her father lift her on his shoulders to see parades? Did she have a favorite doll, a pet, a hiding place where she went to cry when the world became too cruel? Mary Ann Nichols. Polly, they called her. Such a cheerful nickname for such a sad ending. Who first called her Polly? A lover? A friend? Someone who saw joy in her that I was never able to see? And Mary Kelly. God, Mary Kelly. 25 years old. A quarter century of breathing and laughing and crying and hoping. She told me about Ireland, about green fields and clean air. She told me about the child taken from her, the daughter she loved more than her own life. What was that child's name? Mary never told me, and I never asked. Such a fundamental failure of curiosity, of basic human interest. I was so focused on the ending that I ignored the beginning, so obsessed with death that I overlooked life. If I could speak to that nameless daughter now, what would I say? Your mother thought of you in her final moments. She died quickly. She is free from suffering now. All lies, comfortable lies designed to make the unbearable seem bearable. The truth is simpler and more terrible. Her mother died because I decided she should die. Because I needed her to die. Because her death served my purpose more than her life served anyone else's. These names follow me now through the streets of Whitechapel. They whisper from shadows and call from alleyways. They have become more real to me in death than they ever were in life. Because death has stripped away all my careful justifications and left me facing the simple fact of what I have done. I have stolen names from the world. I have silenced voices that might have spoken words of love or wisdom or simple human comfort. I have erased possibilities that were not mine to erase. But their names remain, in my memory, in police records, in newspaper accounts, in the grief of those who knew them. Perhaps that is a kind of immortality. Perhaps being remembered, even in connection with horror, is better than being forgotten entirely. Or perhaps that is just another comfortable lie. Perhaps there is no redemption in remembrance, no meaning in martyrdom, no purpose in becoming part of someone else's story. The names echo in my skull like church bells tolling for the dead. Martha, Mary Ann, Annie, Elizabeth, Catherine, Mary Jane. A litany of loss, a catalogue of choices that cannot be unmade. November 30th, 1888. Letters to the Damned. Why did I write to the newspapers? What compulsion drove me to put pen to paper and sign my work with that theatrical flourish? From hell, I wrote, as if I were truly writing from the depths of damnation itself. Perhaps I was. Perhaps I am. Perhaps this room above the bakery is just another chamber in the great labyrinth of the damned, and these words are being written by fingers that have already forgotten what redemption feels like. The letters were a mistake. I see that now. They transformed a series of private conversations between myself and my subjects into a public performance. They made Jack the Ripper into a character in a penny dreadful, rather than a student of human truth. Dear boss, I wrote, as if the newspaper editors were my collaborators rather than my chroniclers, as if we were all participants in the same grand theatrical production, as if their horror and my purpose were somehow complementary forces working toward the same end. But what was I trying to communicate? What message was so important that it required such dramatic presentation? That I existed, that I was clever, that I could taunt the forces of order while remaining safely hidden in plain sight? Or was it something deeper, a desperate attempt to be understood, to have my work appreciated by someone other than myself? The letters of a man who had become so isolated from humanity that even negative attention seemed preferable to no attention at all. I wrote about sending half of Catherine Eddowes' kidney to the authorities. Such a theatrical gesture, but one that revealed more about my state of mind than any amount of analysis. I was sending pieces of my work out into the world like an artist distributing samples of his latest painting. I give you fair warning, I wrote. But warning of what? More deaths? More lessons? More conversations in the language of violence and silence? Perhaps I was warning them about myself. Perhaps some part of me, even then, understood that I was becoming something monstrous and wanted to be stopped before the transformation was complete. But no one understood the warning. They read threat where I meant confession, saw calculation where I felt desperation. They turned my cry for help into evidence of criminal sophistication. The letters made me famous, but they also made me lonely. Before I wrote them, I was unknown but authentic. After I wrote them, I was celebrated but false. Jack the Ripper became a public figure, a character in the great ongoing drama of London's fear. And characters, unlike people, have no choice but to continue performing their assigned roles until the story ends. Is that what I have become? A character trapped in a story that has taken on its own momentum? Thanks for sticking with me all the way to the end of this diary. I'd love to hear what you thought. Just drop a comment below. If this helped you in any way, a like and a subscription would mean a lot. And if you'd like to support the channel, you can do that through the QR code on the bottom right or the link in the description. Thanks again for today. I hope you'll join us again next time.